Let me take you back to 1974, a baseball field. Deadly rivals meet, Lorne Park Public School against Tecumseh Public School. Patrolling right field for Tecumseh Public School is future four-time Olympian, world champion, number 13, Laumann. She's alert. She's ready. She's saying something to herself over and over again. Maybe it's a motivational mantra. What she's saying is, oh, please don't hit the ball to me. Please don't hit it to me. I was not a natural athlete in public school. I was tall, gangly, and I just didn't have that, eye-ball kind of connection, right? And, but I didn't really have a choice. I didn't really have a choice of whether to be athletic or not, because in those days, we had phys ed, we had intramural sports. Everybody played some sort of sport after school, and that's how I started running. In let's call it like 83, 81, 82, somewhere around there, I joined the Mississauga track team. And my first coach was this passionate Finn with a love for all things outdoors and quite a good understanding of physiology. He got to know us as athletes, and he said to us, I want to know what you're dreaming about, what your goals are. I'm like, goals? I didn't know goals were a thing. As my daughter says, it's a thing, Mom. So I set the goal that summer to run an 800 meters in 2 minutes and 16 seconds. That year at the Ontario Championships, I took my stopwatch down to breakfast. I became obsessed with this goal of 2:16. And while I was eating breakfast and talking to other people, I kept clicking the watch at when I thought 2:16 was, and then looking at it to see how close I was. That year at the Ontario Championships, I ran 2:16. Thank you. So it'll come as no surprise to you who know me as an athlete that, of course, I'm a huge advocate of physical activity in the schools. I really think we need to bring back those specialist teachers, those people that are passionate about movement and phys ed and actually really know how to get kids moving. And I think that movement needs to be integrated into our school day so that no kid has to sit still all day. For me, my body is kind of like the gateway to my mind and to my soul. Backstage about half an hour ago, I realized, oh my God, I'm not breathing, which told me that I was nervous. So I started breathing, and guess what? I felt a lot better. Yeah, funny that, eh? I access my soul through yoga and meditation and gentle movement. So our body is so important. It's not about just educating the mind. It's about educating the body and the soul of a student. Does that make sense? Sport is also a place where a lot of kids set their first goal, kind of have their first dream. In Canada, it's often that they want to be a hockey player. But for me, I watched the 1976 Olympics on television, and I was captivated by this young gymnast from Romania. She scored a perfect 10 in the history of the sport of gymnastics. Do we remember her name? Can you yell it out? Yeah, Nadia Comaneci. From the moment I saw Nadia at the Olympics, I wanted to be the next Nadia Comaneci. I could see myself leaping and jumping on the balance beam, 5'11", 160 pounds. But that really is what inspired my Olympic dream. By the time I was 11 years old, I had 3 major dreams for my life. I wanted to go to the Olympics, and W.O. Mitchell came to our school, and he read from the book, Who Has Seen the Wind? And he lifted me off that cold concrete gym floor into rural Saskatchewan, where kids played hockey with frozen cow dung. So I don't know, I wanted to be a writer. And when I was 11, it was the time where there was a great drought in Ethiopia, and I wanted to help the kids in Ethiopia. I started rowing in the fall of 1982, and the reason I started rowing was not because I had a natural affinity for the sport or anything, but my sister started rowing, and the rowing club was along my running route. And when I was running by the rowing club, my sister's coach, Fred Luke, would yell, "Try a real sport." So, I don't know, eventually, I got stress fractures and I tried a real sport. And I fell in love with the sport of rowing. And I set a goal, because I knew I needed to have a goal. And the goal was to make the national team that year. I was not cocky. I really wasn't. I was just totally naive. I didn't know about the amount of training and effort that goes into making the national team. But 10 months later, not knowing what I could not do, I made the national team. The people in my life who really touched me, who really taught me, the teachers, the coaches, were passionate. And they brought that passion to young people without any particular regard to what they would get out of it. And they also connected with us. The previous speaker talked about connection. I have 4 children, 14, 16, 17, and 18. Really. 3 out of those 4 children have IEPs, and 1 is profoundly autistic. And in my daughter's IEP, it states that in order for her to learn, she needs to make a strong connection with her teacher. Amazing. She needs to make a strong connection with her teacher. We make connection when we drop for a minute our ego, our persona, our role, and show our humanity, show our vulnerability. Kids don't really care what we know until they know we care. W.O. Mitchell cared enough to come to our little school in rural Ontario. My first running coach, Seppo, cared enough to schlep all over Ontario going to track meets on the weekend. My first rowing coach, Fred Luke, cared enough to load the boat trailer in torrential rain. But in order to make connection, we also need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to show our humanity. How many of you enjoy being vulnerable? Show of hands, anybody? Oh yeah, there's one back there. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And also, strangely, in our culture, too many of us equate vulnerability with weakness. Well, I'm here today to tell you that vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. It takes strength to have a dream and to go after that dream without any guarantee that you will realize it. It takes strength to show that you don't know everything, that you don't have all the answers. It takes strength to open your heart, to show yourself with no idea about how people will respond. In my early parenting days, I think I kind of put on the role of parent, I really wanted to be a great parent. And so I signed my kids up for all this stuff. They were listening to Baby Bach in the womb, they really were. And we went to Moms and Tots gymnastics, and we did music for young children, and there was all this rushing, and this feeling that I was spending all my time in the should-dos, rather than really showing them who I was. And somewhere between, winning the Olympic gold medal for parenting and having a nervous breakdown, I found the necessity of just being who I was. Because being who I was the greatest gift that I could give my kids. And so I started showing up. I started being who I was. I was the parent who ran mini Olympics in their backyard. I was the parent who let my children and most of the other children in the neighborhood mattress surf inside in our home, unceremoniously crashing into our glass back door several times. I was the parent who let my children have breakfast on the kitchen floor. Together, we would crawl out the upstairs window with our pillows at night to look at the stars. And you know what? I know that I didn't give my kids, I'm not giving my kids everything, but I'm giving them all that I have. And I hope that their other parent, that their teachers, that their grandparents will show up fully and give them the gift of who they are and express it to them and show it to them. So that will round out their education. 8 months ago, as Craig alluded to, I wrote and published a memoir called Unsinkable. Unsinkable is my story, growing up in a family with a mom who had an undiagnosed mental illness. It's my story about my own struggles with depression and anxiety. Growing up in my house, a lot of the time I didn't know what mom I was coming home to. Was I coming home to that mom who was sculpting and listening to music? Was I coming home to that mom who was drinking and screaming? And while I was writing this book, I would stop and I would lose my courage. Because I would think, oh my goodness, how is my family going to react to this book? I was afraid. I was afraid of changing the public's perception of who I was. But I also came to a place in my life that I had to tell the story. I mean, how could I stand up on stages like this one and share with you that every goal you've ever had for your life is achievable? How could I tell you that whatever obstacle you're facing in your life today, that you can overcome it, if I didn't explain in some way how I came to believe it? I feel that I've really made myself vulnerable, and I've showed who I really am. And as I've shown who I really am, nothing prepared me for the response. The emails, the texting, the Twitter, the Facebook, the handwritten notes that people would give to me. It seemed that by me finding my courage to be authentic and to tell my story, I inadvertently gave other people permission to tell theirs. By telling our stories, by showing ourselves, we give people room to be who they are, to show themselves. I'm not suggesting that you go to school tomorrow and tell your whole life story to your students, just so you know. But I am suggesting that maybe you want to increase your vulnerability quotient. Maybe you want to bring yourself a little bit more fully into the classroom. And I am saying that I'm hoping we can create in our schools and in our communities environments that encourage self-expression, encourage teachers to be more who they are. You know, our education system is so heavily curriculum-based, isn't it? I mean, there's just so much to do. Boxes to tick, provincial exams to be written, IEP meetings to be scheduled. Where does a teacher just get to be who they are and show that to their students? You know, we tell teachers how to teach, when to teach, what to teach. And I think inadvertently, we've squashed creativity, innovation, and self-expression. We want to teach kids, we want to parent kids who figure out who they are and express that person in their communities, in their families. What do I want for my kids? I want my kids to, you know, get a higher education. I want them to have great jobs. But really, what I want is to figure out who they are. And I want them to be able to express that person physically, emotionally, spiritually in the world, and to bring that person to their families and their communities. Every teacher wants the same thing. Every teacher has the same goal. They want to bring out the full potential in a child. And what is greater than helping a child discover who they are and fully expressing that person in the world? Thank you very much.